Hello, I am Matt, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the very old second generation iPad. The second generation iPad was released in 2011, so it's coming up to 11 years old in 2022. You can find this iPad on eBay or Facebook Marketplace for about 30 quid, and this raises the questions. Is this iPad usable in 2022, and should you go ahead and just buy one as like a cheap device? So I'll give you a quick summary. This iPad is, in a way, borderline e-waste. However, I do think it still serves a purpose for a very niche set of requirements. If you want an iPad that you're only going to use for watching movies or videos that you already own or for reading ebooks, then this iPad could actually be a really cheap way to achieve that. But anything beyond that, then no, this iPad isn't really worth your time. So I'm going to give you a full overview of the second generation iPad in 2022 and hopefully enable you to make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to go ahead and pick one of these up. So starting off with the design and display, the front of this iPad features a 9.7 inch LCD panel, which is noticeably worse than LCD panels found on the latest iPhones such as the iPhone SE or the iPhone 11. This display has a pixel density of 132 pixels per inch, which is much lower than the 326 pixels per inch found on newer Apple LCDs. When using this iPad, you will be able to pick out individual pixels, and it can also be quite difficult to see under bright light. With all that criticism being said, this display is actually a pretty solid asset of this iPad. The display is fine for reading content or watching video. Although the display isn't great, it's adequate in 2022, and I actually still do use this iPad myself when I'm travelling on trains to watch movies. Around the side of the display are very thick white bezels, but this doesn't really bother me too much and they kind of fade away fairly quickly. So the back of this iPad curves and it's really thin, and that makes it perfect for sort of shoving in a backpack or taking around with you, and I genuinely do use it for watching movies on the train. It's the same thickness pretty much as my iPhone 12, which is very impressive. At the bottom of the iPad you will see the old 30-pin connector. It can be a bit of a pain getting hold of these now, and then on the back of the iPad you will find a small camera. So moving on to performance, this iPad is powered by the A5 chip, the same processor that can be found in the iPhone 4S. This is accompanied by half a gigabyte of RAM, so clearly this is not a very powerful device in 2022. Also, the latest version of iOS that's available on this iPad is iOS 9, and this basically means that all apps don't work on here. Whilst a few apps work, they're not guaranteed to continue working in the future. For example, the YouTube app was recently discontinued on iOS 9. The main app that I use that's still available is Prime Video, however I can't guarantee that it will be available or usable for any time in the future. So in terms of daily use, doing anything with this iPad isn't really particularly fun. Apps can take a really long time to load, like a really long time. However, it is just passable for web usage on Safari. It can just about get the job done. Web pages can be a little bit slow to load, but once they've loaded, it kind of does work fine. Pinch to zoom is relatively smooth, so web browsing is just about passable. I wouldn't want to do it a ton, but every now and again it will be okay. So although it has pretty rubbish performance, there are definitely use cases for this iPad. Although it's slow, I found that it can be really comfortably used as an e-reader or an entertainment device. So if you own any videos or movies, you can just load it up onto this iPad and it will be really good for that purpose. For example, I recently had a very long train journey and I just watched Layer Cake on the train, connected up my AirPods to the iPad, it worked fine and it was perfect for that purpose. Or if you want to use it as an e-reader, it will do that very well as well. So I would say the only two real use cases viable for this iPad is loading it up with movies or using it as an e-reader. So moving on to battery. The battery life is surprisingly great. So I used this for a really long train journey up to Scotland. I was able to watch 2 movies on the iPad, about 4 hours worth of content, and still had battery to spare, like plenty of battery to spare. I charged it up overnight and watched another couple movies on my way back on the train. So battery life really isn't going to be a problem for you, I don't think, because it's not particularly usable for any demanding applications. The battery life is sort of fine. So moving on to the camera. This iPad has 2 cameras, a selfie camera and a main camera. If I'm being honest, they may as well not even be there for any use cases in 2022. This camera is not passable. The main camera is a 0.7 megapixel camera and can shoot 720p video. Under good lighting, you can just about work out what you're taking a photo of or videoing, but it's not very good. Under poorer conditions, the camera quickly goes from not great to awful. The front-facing camera is 0.3 megapixels and can shoot VGA quality video. Again, I don't think this is something that you're going to use. So to conclude, this iPad is coming up to 11 years old, which is fairly old for any sort of technology device, and it's aged both not very well and fairly well at the same time. So the 2 good uses for this iPad are low processing power video consumption or e-reader. So take for example, if you just want a really cheap screen that you can give to your kids, whack a movie on it and they can be entertained for a few hours, and it's so cheap that you don't really care if it breaks, this will do the job perfectly. Or if you want an e-reader for yourself, or you just want something that you don't really have to worry about breaking and you can watch movies and use as an e-reader, this iPad does do the trick fairly well for those 2 purposes. But anything beyond that, definitely not. This iPad is not worth your time and not worth buying. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it was somewhat informative. If you did, please do leave a like and subscribe.